Hey everyone, Dev with Crime Hive, and doing a couple updates on a few cases here that I've been following, and I really want to talk about this update with Letecia Stauch. She gave an exclusive interview to Crime Online and has essentially given us a new theory, a bizarre theory of how Gannon may have disappeared. So I wanted to give some updates on that, and then I'm going to segue into an update on the Lori Vallow Chad Daybell case, and I want you guys to really hear this body cam recording and see her reaction as she's being served a search warrant. And then I'm gonna go over to, we're talking about Carole Baskin, Joe Exotic. I know it's been crazy. A lot of us have watched that series on Netflix with all these different theories and aspects of that case, but there are some new developments, potentially some new clues that could help in really reviving this Don Lewis, this former husband of Carole Baskin, and what may have led to his disappearance or potential murder. So I want to give you an update on that as well. Before I do, again, this is Dev with Crime Hive. If you like these kind of true crime videos, consider subscribing to my channel. You can hit that bell notification, and that will give you updates as I continue to come out with more on these cases. So let's talk about Letecia Stauch. Now, this was a jailhouse interview, and this is from Crime Online, and she basically gives this new version of what may have happened to Gannon. And so in this interview, and I'll try to move this around as well as we go, but she continues to maintain her innocence. And recently, what she said was she believes that Albert Stauch, right, father of Gannon, should be in jail for manslaughter. That's her newest account now. Now, she wouldn't go into specifics on this manslaughter charge, but one thing that she did say is that Albert apparently owed someone named Edgar money, which led to his disappearance. We've heard of the previous interview with police where she mentioned this mysterious person named Eduardo, and now she's mentioning a new person named Edgar who potentially was owed this money from Albert. So that was a big development from this. And then she goes on to say a few other really interesting things. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through as I'm looking through this. She basically said that she has been covering for others, hoping that the full truth that's not sugar-coated would come out. And then she goes on to say that, and this is a direct quote from this interview, she says, him, referring to Albert, and Edgar was getting into it because he owed Edgar some money. We had the money that should have been paid from the cruise, she explained. And then she says, Albert made a stupid decision, It just wasn't, a good situation. So, he told me a story to tell the police. And I just didn't know what to say. So that's her account of this is what she's coming out with now as she speaks with Crime Online. So she said that Albert also said that she didn't have a child to lose and that he had many law enforcement and military officials that could assist if she didn't snitch. Now, it is really interesting to hear this new information from her. I know that there are people out there that believe Albert could potentially be involved. And again, I'm just coming straight with this information. We don't know at this time. There's not enough evidence to corroborate that. Some people believe that Albert may have something to do with this. Some believe there's no chance Letecia did this all on her own. I'm curious what your thoughts are below. Now, a couple other things that she said in this here. I want to read a couple more passages with this. There's not much on this update, but she did give this interview, so it's just interesting to hear more about this. Now, she went on to explain that Albert claimed he would pull some strings to help her out. And then she goes on to this little section here that I'll read where she says, where the police, messed up is January 27. He was on a train. You see what I'm saying? I'm thinking that that's their thing, but it's not because they came to my house with hours of body cam. There was nothing. Like, you check my car on the body cams, you take everything. You, law enforcement, just don't like it. There was no way, you know what I mean? Their time frame, it was all wrong because they couldn't figure it out. Where was he? Gannon, he truly was gone. He was with Edgar. That's her account recently from that. What do you make of this information so far? And I'll continue on a little bit more. She said he should be here for manslaughter, and that's referring to Albert. because it was on January 28th. That's why the police didn't have anything. Albert came in on the 28th from the airport and was like in a moment of rage. I mean, I could be on the low end and I could say, you know, he should be here for murder, but I'm not. I'm saying that it should be, I guess, manslaughter would be the right thing. So she goes on to explain that, and then she mentions that she wouldn't reveal this true identity of Edgar, which could possibly be a pseudonym because he has dangerous affiliations. So really interesting to hear that. I think she mentioned one other thing here in this article here with CrimeOnline. It goes on to talk about other aspects of the case, which I have other videos on that. If you're not very familiar with this case, or you want to take a look at some of the videos I've done, like on the affidavit and that sort of information, you can certainly do that. I'll probably provide some links on those previous videos as well. And the affidavit's all over online. You could find that and download that and look through that to decide for yourself what your thoughts are on this case. Another thing that she did mention, though, and this was really interesting, is she basically said she lost track of what her husband wanted her to say. So that's another thing that she has started saying. She says, I totally had lost track of what he, Albert Stauch, was telling me to say. And I wasn't even mentally okay. And he just kept saying, I got the TRICARE. I got 16 years in the military. Don't worry about it, you know? And I always lived all the time forgiving him. Like, come on. I forgive them for multiple affairs. How much emotional abuse I was under with that situation, you know? So she now has this other angle of not being able to keep track of her story because of Albert. So there's a lot of blame now on Albert. And so I wanted to give that update. There's a lot of information that we still don't know. There's a gag order in effect. So there is some information we just don't have access to corroborate some of these allegations by Letecia. But I wanted to give that update. Now, I want to segue to Lori Vallow. A lot of us have been following that case. And there is a video. This is body cam footage here. And I got this from Daily Mail. And this really shows when Chad and Lori were in Hawaii and they were served this search warrant. And I'm not going to show the whole clip. It's probably like 7 minutes long. It shows police, on their way and talking and sort of that sort of thing. But I wanted you to really just see her reaction when she was served these documents. I'm just going to play a short snippet of it. Curious what your thoughts are below. What do you think of this reaction from her when she's being served these documents? Let's take a look here. So this is the vehicle. They've approached their vehicle, and they're about to explain what's going on. I'll move this somewhere. Maybe over here. Maybe down here. What do you make of that reaction, by the way? They just said that she was served a search warrant, and you just see her, kind of give an interesting look. You can interpret that how you will. She looks up, and then she's not really saying anything. What do you guys make of that reaction from her? Someone that's being served a search warrant in a very big case here. Very, 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 a lot of attention, obviously, in this. And so there's not a lot to this video. I'm not going to bore you with the entire video because there's really not much else in this. But I did want to show you her reaction, and I was just wondering what your take on that was. So anyway, that's an update I have with the Lori Vallow case. And then the last thing I really want to get into here is Carole Baskin. And the reason I'm giving this update is because we've learned that there's going to be a show that potentially could give us some more information in the disappearance or potential murder of Don Lewis, her former husband. Now, we obviously know that Joe Exotic has been very outspoken on this, even while he's in prison, talking about wanting to help in any way he can to show that Carole Baskin was involved in Joe's murder or in Don's murder, right? So this update that I got, though, that I just want to briefly touch on real quick, was that there are new details in the mysterious disappearance of Carole Baskin's husband. And there is a new show that's coming out, and today's the 6th of September. It's coming out in 3 days. And so it's a true crime docuseries called 48 Hours of Suspicion. And it apparently is going to give us some interesting information. I'll just share a snippet of what that information is. So in this season premiere, which airs on September 9th, there apparently is a woman named Trish Farr Payne. And I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit just so you guys can maybe see this little update that I'm going to explain here. So I'll enlarge that here for you. So her name is Trish Farr Payne, and she comes forward claiming that her ex-husband, Kenny Farr, who worked as a handyman for Baskin and Lewis, may have played some role in his disappearance. Okay? And she goes on a little bit further. So this is what she says about it. She says, 2 days before Lewis went missing, Farr Payne recounts that her husband warned her, "Don's gone, and I don't want you talking about him." Farr Payne says someone left a large padlocked freezer, I'm talking about a freezer, on her front porch that vanished about a week after Don disappeared. So she says she waited to come forward to the police about what happened because she was afraid for her family's safety. She says, I had my kids. I was afraid for them. I was more afraid for them than anything, said Farr Payne. So really interesting information. Apparently, it's going to include interviews in this show with Lewis's ex-wife and his 3 daughters. And they're not sure if Baskin or Joe Exotic will make an appearance on this show, but it should be very interesting. We could potentially learn some new potential clues or some potential evidence that could be gathered. Now, the last thing I want to show you, though, is this interview with the sheriff here. There's been multiple sheriffs working this investigation. It's not closed. But this sheriff, I think this was a really great interview if you listen to this and just watch it just to refresh yourself on this case. And it's not too long, but it's going to give you some good insights on this case. What they've already looked into, because there's a lot of theories out there on how Don Lewis may have died. And this kind of brings this case back in with what police have already looked at, what they're still potentially looking at, if Carole Baskin's a suspect, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to play that quick clip, and then that'll be the end for this video. And again, if you followed me this far, consider subscribing to my channel. I come out with updates on these cases quite often, but I want to get into this interview here. It's a really good one. I thought it was a really good one that will give us a refresh on this case and kind of what's going on with it here.
Everywhere. I know the case was never formally closed, but it's sort of being reopened right now, so to speak. You're the 4th sheriff to now have this case. Take us through it. Where are we right now with the case?
Right now, it's a cold case, and what I mean by that is there's no active leads. The last thing we've done with this case, I should say the last 2 things, was in 2010 when we wanted to get the DNA from Don Lewis's children. We did that. We entered that into a database, hoping that if Don Lewis's body is recovered, we're able to make the connection back to us. We have fingerprints. He had been arrested a couple times. We have dental records, but the one thing missing and wasn't utilized as much back in 1997 was DNA, so we added that. Fast forward a year later in 2011, our investigators reached out to Carole and asked her to come in for a polygraph test. She respectfully declined, said that her attorney instructed her not to do it, that it wouldn't vindicate her and it wouldn't prohibit the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office from pursuing criminal charges in the future if we deemed appropriate.
So you're sitting on the couch with your family watching this series over the weekend. You're in a unique position as the sheriff of Hillsborough County now. Did you sit there and scratch your head and say, "Wow, we gotta relook at this case"?
Well, in some cases we did. There's in some instances we did, I should say. I looked back and I looked at, they talked about the meat grinder and that the meat grinders were used to feed the cats, and people suspect that's the way it happened, and that's why we will never locate him. Well, the meat grinders had been removed from the property, several weeks before his disappearance. Not saying they couldn't have been involved, but they weren't on the property. You heard about the septic tank. Check the septic tank. Well, the septic tank that Carole put in wasn't installed until several years after. But then you look, and like you sitting there watching the series, when you look at the fact that this wealthy individual left his wealth behind, left his money behind. When's the last time in all your years of reporting that you've ever heard someone leaving without their wealth behind. And the same thing in law enforcement. In my 28 years experience, I've never had a missing persons case where someone left their entire wealth behind. Along the same lines, they touch on the series, watching it, and they talk about the will.
Right.
You know, who...
Now, that's really interesting here because in a lot of these interviews with law enforcement, they don't give a lot of information out. And this sheriff is voluntarily giving us a lot of information on this case. And that's why I really like this interview. He's really touching on a lot of different aspects of what a lot of us have thought may have happened, different theories that are out there. And he continues. So this is a really good interview. And I'm not going to interrupt too much on this because it's such good information, I think, even though it was back in April of 2020. But let's continue here.
Who has ever, and I've talked to some of my friends that are probate attorneys, who has ever seen a will where there's a provision in there, if I ever disappear or become missing, leave the bulk of my wealth to this person?
So bizarre. Is Carole Baskin a suspect right now?
She isn't. She isn't even a person of interest at this point. We have no evidence to deem her or anyone else equally as important as a suspect in this case, and I'm hoping that the popularity of this Netflix series will change that.
So tell us about the tips that you've gotten. Have tips been coming in every day? Have any been legitimate, good, something you'd follow up on?
We've been receiving, on average, the last 6 days, about 6 tips a day, either telephone calls or emails, but no viable tips yet. Most are like you and I. They watch the show and they believe who did it and how he died, and they want to share that with us. And I'm certainly not discouraging anybody from sending anything. And listen, send it all in. We have a detective supervisor who's assigned to the case. We'll comb through it. And again, anything that's viable, we're going to pursue to the end of earth to try to bring some closure to Mr. Lewis's family and bring some justice.
You know, there is, to your point, there's so much, I don't know, circumstantial evidence in this case, even down to his van being left at that small airport with his keys in the van and his briefcase in there. What businessman would travel somewhere without their briefcase? A lot of twists, a lot of turns, but I think it does seem like something did happen to Don Lewis. Have you spoken with the lead detective that was on the case, John Marciano, who was on it in 1997? And he was the head of kind of the Hillsborough County Missing Persons at that time. Has he weighed in on this at all? Anything changed there?
I have not. I personally haven't contacted him. But you bring up the airport, and one of the things that wasn't covered, yes, we recovered his car at one of the private airports, but we pulled all the passenger manifest. He wasn't on any type of plane, commercial or private, that left the country. More importantly, he had 2 passports. Neither one of his 2 passports were flagged as leaving the country during this time period either. We also... John Marciano at the time and another detective flew down to Costa Rica. No one down there had seen him in several months prior to his disappearance.
What do you think happened?
Really good updates, refreshers.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I certainly have my suspicions like anyone else. Do I believe he's been killed, that he's dead? Yes, I do. Do I know who did it and how he died? That I don't know, and I'm hoping that we will get that missing interview, that missing piece of evidence to solve this case.
With a cold case, when does it come to the point where you would reapproach somebody like maybe Carole Baskin or even Don's ex-wife Gladys and his daughters? When does that step get taken?
We will revisit and re-interview anytime that we're provided some type of missing information, some type of lead that would warrant us contacting these individuals again.
The public seems...
Which there is new information that's going to be gathered in this case, apparently from this DocuSeries. So it is going to be interesting. Will it lead to anything? We don't really know. But this case is still very active, even though it's been quite cold for so many years. And a lot of us just want to know, just want to know what happened. And this hopefully will give us more insight on it. It's going to be aired in 3 days from now.
Pretty convinced, and we've seen this with cases like this before. The public at least seems somewhat convinced that Carole should be at least considered a suspect. There was something in the series that was interesting that I looked into. It did seem like Don tried to file a restraining order against Carole about 2 months before he actually died or went missing in August of 97. He filed it in June. It was not withheld. But could that be considered something that could be a motive, a pending divorce or something like that in a relationship? What usually happens in these cases in your experience?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that end up becoming motives. We were told that by his office manager back then when we interviewed her, but we weren't able to track it down. We weren't able ever to find through the court system that there was anything filed. So that didn't become a viable lead back then either. You know, I have to tell you, as complicated and as eccentric all these individuals were in this Tiger King documentary, his life was no different. And I think that's what became such an obstacle in solving this case.
So you're the fourth sheriff now to have this case since 1997. You think that you'll be the sheriff to finally bring justice to Don Lewis's family?
I sure hope so. I hope. There was nothing that would be.
We'll
more
find
gratifying.
out. We'll find out. So I wanted to share that with you all. And again, Dev with Crime Live, I will be out with more videos, giving you more updates on these cases as well. I hope you all are having a great Labor Day weekend. If you're in the U.S. or wherever you're at in the world, appreciate you watching, and stay tuned for another video. Thanks.